Moving on to the Minnesota Vikings, Marcus. You talk about losing a quarterback. This team lost their quarterback in the offseason. Sam Darnold is now a Seattle Seahawk, but their first-round pick from last year is healing from his injury and looking like he's ready to go. J.J. McCarthy steps in as the presumed starter for this Minnesota Vikings team, who, I mean, their offense is good. The defense looked amazing last year, and it led to them having one of the best records in the NFC last year. And unfortunately, when the playoff time came, it fell short. So we talk about the Minnesota Vikings, Marcus. Like, obviously, this team is going through a major change at quarterback, which they expected to do last year. How do you feel about that? Like, when you get a rookie quarterback who's not a rookie, he has a chance to, like, learn the playbook, be in training camp. Like, talk to me about your thoughts on this team in general offensively with the rookie quarterback.
Well, here's the thing. I got the Vikings finishing fourth, right? But they're dangerous. They're the most dangerous team. I think that anybody has pegged to finish fourth is probably the most dangerous fourth team in the NFL, right? Because, like you said, they have a defense. If you have a defense, you're in every single game, right? There's no blowout. When you have a good defense, you just need to make a few plays on offense, right? And so I think the quarterback being able to lead on that defense, I think it helps that he's not a rookie per se, but it's his first year because you get that time in the film room. You get to learn from a guy like Sam Darnold for a year, right? The team doesn't get all your tells yet from film, right? So I think, people don't realize that the rookie quarterback a lot of times has an advantage because they don't have that knowledge on you just yet. You know what I mean? That was one thing that, really surprised me on the detail of preparation in the NFL. Right. And as soon as I arrived in Green Bay, they were breaking down each quarterback in the NFC North. Right. And
what month was it, like in the middle of summer?
This is like May. This is like April. This is like May. I think they had Green Bay on the schedule that year. Or no, I think they had the Niners on the schedule that year, and they were breaking down their quarterbacks at the time. And, hey, every time he scrambles right, this is what he wants to do. Every time he scrambles left, you know what I mean? He would, the percentage of him
was
running.
Was it Alex Smith?
I think it was Alex Smith at the time. Or it might have been Kaepernick, but, had just taken over. But it was anytime those guys, would scramble, what they did under pressure, what they did on third down, there was a percentage and it was a breakdown for every situation. Know what I mean? And so the depth, so the more you play, right, the more right they get on their, now the percentages are really telltale signs, right? And so a lot of times if those guys aren't perfecting their game and getting better, that's why you see quarterbacks getting chewed up and chewed out, right? And even these guys that might start off hot, because once they get a book on you, right, now you're either going to pivot and, and self-scout yourself and figure out how you can get better that way. And you got a good coaching staff that says, hey, every time you scramble right, you don't, you do the check down. Or when you scramble left, you never run, right? Or it's 5% of the time you're going to run. Or, and so once these guys are so good, the D-line is so good. Once they get the tails on you, you know what I mean? Because the NFL is a collection of not only the biggest, the strong, and the fastest, but these are the smartest guys as well. You know what I mean? These guys, they know, you know what I mean? And, and you're playing with a guy, these linebackers that's played in the game for so long, against a guy like Urlacher or Briggs, right? And that's only because I watched those guys, but they were out there on a string and they just knew they would check. They knew the checks. They knew the calls. And the thing is, you get good at guessing. Yep. You know what I mean? You get good at guessing. You take educated guesses. You take all these informations, and then they're like, yo, I'm either going to get it or I'm not going to get it. But I think you're doing this, and I'm going to go for it.
You know, it's crazy. Like, when J.J. McCarthy's coming in like on a clean slate, and you talked about this, like, they don't know his cadence. They don't know his tendencies. And so, when you have a guy that's also played in a pro system with Harbaugh in Michigan, like, now you come in and play with Kevin O'Connell, and you talked about this. It's like these guys, this division that knows each other so well. It's like they don't know this guy. He's an ultimate wild card. And you talked about it, like the record maybe it's not there, but they're going to have a chance to upset teams in any given game. And I think JJ McCarthy is just one of those players in fantasy. In Superflex leagues, he's going to be a true wild card, because there's a chance that he's not as good year one, but then there's also the chance he breaks out in a major way and has Justin Jefferson, he has Jordan Addison, he has TJ Hockenson, and now this quarterback looks the part. So I don't know. I have mixed feelings about JJ McCarthy, and I think that there's a world where he produces as a top 15 quarterback. I'm just not willing to bet on it. That's where I'm at. I'm not willing to bet on it.
Right. You definitely want to see, he's somebody that you want to keep an eye on. I think he's somebody that might not get drafted. You know what I mean? So you can he'll be right there at the top, but I think he might get hot early. And he's somebody you definitely might want to stash, or, one of them really late draft picks, where you're like, yo, with his weapons, you know what I mean? And trying to prove himself, right? I think that he could definitely throw the rock, right? Like you said, he had Harbaugh, and I think Harbaugh is like the QB whisperer.
He
right?
is. We've seen that.
We've seen that, right? We've seen that. And so when you play for a guy like that in college, right, and then you got that winning mentality, my only hiccup is them leaning on their defense and playing a little more conservative, right? You can get that, but when you could throw it up to a guy like Jefferson, you know what I mean? When you can just throw it up, when you could. Hey, when all
is him.
When all this fails, you know what I mean? He's one of the best, if not the best in the league.
Man, right? He's one of the best in the league, if not the best in the league. But then also, he's one of the best in fantasy as well. You talk about this receiving core, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, and then you get TJ Hockenson in there. It's a really good setup when it comes to the receivers. And I think that's the interesting thing is we've drafted Justin Jefferson for years at the number one position, Marcus. It's like, that's what you do. You draft Justin Jefferson and you don't think about it because he's like 1,500 yards and you know it. But Jamar Chase is also up there now. And so Jamar Chase had himself a year. It's going to be a hard decision. I think the conversation is, do you take Jamar Chase at number one or Justin Jefferson? And I think, to be honest, I think Justin Jefferson is, as crazy as it sounds, probably going to be a value this year. Like not getting him at the first pick or second pick. You can get Justin Jefferson as a third, as the fourth, as the fifth pick. So I think this receiving room, when it comes to this receiving room, I'm very excited. If JJ McCarthy hits, I think we have winners out of Justin Jefferson. I think TJ Hawkinson's going to be back to what he was. I think Jordan Addison, if he can avoid the suspension, I know he had some off-field stuff. If he can avoid the suspension, Jordan Addison is probably going to be a steal as well.
I definitely see him being a steal. I like his game, right? He's another type of guy, right? These guys become home runs if the other guy goes down, right? Yep. Like if anything happens to one of those guys, one of those other receivers, Addison, he becomes a big, big piece, and I see him, making a splash. But that's how those number 2, number 3 guys are, right? They're good pieces, right? They could be a wide receiver 3, possibly 4 in some of those flex leagues, right? But if that guy does go down, and you need a guy, I think, he gonna put up some points.
Yeah, I like Jordan Addison to be one of those boomer bust wide receiver 3s on your team, and we saw it last year out of him. Plays the part well, and I think between him and Jettas, we kind of know what to expect if JJ McCarthy is what he's supposed to be. But the one I think is kind of a little bit more of a value is TJ Hockenson, and I think TJ Hockenson is a player that I really like right now. Is like the tight end 5, potentially outproducing that because we've seen him with the volume. Like as a steal right now, TJ Hockenson is, I think, one of those players, like we talk about the tight end position and like outliers or people who are much different. And with the way Kevin O'Connell features TJ Hockenson, sometimes we're seeing him get like 10 to 12 targets a game. And I think as long as they don't do what you said, Marcus, and like lean on the run game a little too heavy, if they decide, hey, we are going to continue to pass the rock, like I think we have a good opportunity to see TJ Hockenson play at a high level, be a top 3 guy, and he's got to stay healthy too, because that's been a big thing for him. But you did mention the run game, and one of the players I think that's been around for a long time that we get bored of, Aaron Jones. And the team also signed Jordan Mason from the San Francisco 49ers. Aaron Jones is a name that goes outside the top, around like RB 18 to 22. and then Jordan Mason's around like the top end backups, the top end handcuff running backs. How do you feel about this running back situation, knowing that like Aaron Jones has been injury prone at times, but he's still elite, and this offensive line got a lot better in this offseason?
You know what? I think it's a crapshoot. You know what I mean? I think that the one benefit is when you have a rookie quarterback per se, right? You're gonna get those, the check downs, right? You're gonna get a lot of those check downs. So I think in the PPR leagues, he'll bode well, right? But I think, like you said, like he could be one of those boom or bust guys, right? I think that if he stays healthy, he could be a top 15 running back, and maybe creep into that top 10 space if he's healthy. But that's a lot. It's a lot of variables, I think, that have to fall into place.
What about the body? Because he's also an older running back, right? And I think, obviously, what it's like being on that field, being injured and playing through injury and hearing about guys that miss time. He's getting towards the tail end of his career. He's been a smaller back. We've had these injuries concerns, and there's a lot of people who like Jordan Mason, who came from the 49ers. They traded for him. He was good last year for the 49ers while he was healthy. What do you think about Aaron Jones? Do you think he'll try to play through injuries this year, like back in his career? Are you concerned about the injuries, get replaced?
I think there's definitely concerns. Your wear and tear. Father Time doesn't lose, right? And the one thing about the running back position of all positions, right? The older you get, the more worn down, the more hits you take. The NFL naturally it stands for not for long, right? And of all positions, it's that running back one. Where you're taking a lick. And now you have some guys that defy the odds, right? I.e. Derrick Henry and different guys that continue to push through their 30s and have big years. But I think that as you get older as well, you get smarter, right? Yeah. It's like, how many hits do I want to take, right? It's like, if I'm on the roster, if you need me, I don't need 15 carries. I don't need 20 carries, I want to be fresh to make this playoff push, or I want to be fresh, to prolong my career. When you get towards that end, you're like, I want to play 3 or 4 more years, so I might not want to be the workhorse. You know what I mean? And so, I do see that being an issue as far as his how long he's been around.
Yeah, and I think Jordan Mason specifically is one of those players where I've always liked Aaron Jones, to be honest with you. Like, I've always thought he was very underrated, especially when it comes to fantasy. But just in general, he's a really good running back, and he's been around for a long time. But I think that they're probably going to do what you said, is like dial back the workload, give him a little bit more maintenance. That's why you bring in and trade for a guy like Jordan Mason, who came from the Niners, who can handle a full workload if needed. But I think he probably seeds some of that red zone work, some of that passing game work to a guy like Jordan Mason, a little bigger body who can continue to play at a high level. So this running back room is intriguing. And you mentioned it on a different team. You said, hey, when you have the committee here, sometimes that second back might be the person that gets more work. And I think Jordan Mason in the second half of the year could be a really valuable asset.
I think he's definitely a guy you want to keep your eye out on for that second half push. For all the reasons I said about, the starter, right?
Yeah, man. And, obviously we talked about, Brian Flores kind of changing his defense around. His defense looks crazy at times, man. The way that they fly to the ball and his packages are crazy.
Yeah, I love watching them play, man. Fast and intense defense, blitzing, attacking. That's the type of defense. If I become a DC, that's the type of defense I want to run.
When you become a DC.
When I become a DC.
There you go.
Right.
There you go. But when you become, it's funny because, like, obviously we're talking betting right now and these teams, and their win total is really high, Marcus. It's like 8.5. And for them, that's, it's higher. It's about where the Bears were at. It's like, it's higher than I thought it was going to be. Like, you got 10.5 for the Lions, you got 9.5 for the Packers, you got 8.5 for the Bears and for the Vikings, which is, I think that's predicated on the defense and probably them sticking to the ground game. But it's also predicated on like JJ McCarthy being good, really good his first year. Mm-hmm. The over is at -150 and the under is at +125, which is probably reverse of what I thought it was. Are you taking the over at -150 or the under at +125? Vegas seems to think they'll go over. That's a tough one.
It's a tough one, man. You know what? Because of their defense, I'm gonna take the over. I'm gonna take the over. I think 8 is just right. I don't see them winning 7 or less. Right. I definitely don't see them winning 7 or less. 8 becomes really tough because it puts you right there at that 500. But that's the thing, right? The division is so tough. Those games are going to be such a battle that they're going to have to eat when they get out of there. Right. So when we're going to play these other teams in these other conferences, they're going to eat, and they know that they have to because of that competition. Right. So you become a little more hungry when you have a division where every game matters. And it's going to be pretty tight. Like you see how Vegas has them, right? Everybody is in between, 8 and 10 games right in there.
Yeah.
Right. So when you're in 8, every team you have 8 to 10 games and right in there, it's going to be a battle on those games. So it's going to be necessary.
Yeah, I feel like the under is where I'm going with this one. And it's weird because I feel like they'll be good and maybe they'll beat expectations, but I'm also thinking like this is a tough ass division, man, with the Lions, the Packers, and the Bears. And I would like to think that they make the jump, and I would like to think that JJ McCarthy plays in immediately. But when I can get plus 125 on the under for 8 to 7 game, probably win total for them, I think that makes more sense to me than them like making the playoffs again. Like I think they had kind of an outlier year last year where everything went right. And I know the defense is going to be great. I know they have some good veterans on the team. It's just tough for me to put them, like you said, you have them as fourth in the division. It's tough for me to put them over the Bears. It's tough for me to put them over the Packers or the Lions. And like when you play in that kind of division, there has to be one team that just doesn't meet expectations. I kind of feel like the Vikings are that team, unfortunately, man. You think you're on mute.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not mad at that. I think that, at the end of the day, you got to play the game, right? You got to play the game. And so a lot of teams look good on paper. A lot of teams look good on paper that didn't really pan out last year, right? And so, you got to play the game. You got to get in there. They could get rolling. Like I said, I think that they're going to do their real damage when they get outside the conference, when they get outside the league.
Yeah.
I think that's when their damage is going to come. And I think they're going to clean up out there because of that defense. And good defenses travel, right? And if you're playing young quarterbacks and, even veteran quarterbacks, right? Nobody likes that kind of pressure. Nobody likes to be hit. Nobody likes to get beat up, right? And so I think that's what matters the most.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head there, man. Especially if they do stick to the ground game in that defense, it's going to be tough. This entire division, Marcus, this NFC North. Like I said, you have some ties to that NFC North, man. It's going to be a fun division to watch because we're going to get some unexpected things that happen, good and bad, out of this division.
Yeah, I can't wait, man. I can't wait.